Buenas noches. Muchas gracias por haber venido.
Thank you for being here in this debate. It's going to be very interesting. We have many guests. My name's Gianluca Solera, and I am the manager of the Med Dialogue program, and I work with civil society in the Mediterranean, our organism. And as you can see, we have many participants today coming from different countries, from the southern bank of the Mediterranean. And tonight we will speak around a very important topic, which is how civil society can transform politics. What type of relationship there is between civil society and the world of parties and institutions. How to close and connect both worlds that sometimes are in conflict between each other. We will speak about the Arab Spring, about social movements. We will speak about the possibility of reforming politics from social commitment, and we will do it trying to look to reality not only in Spain but also in the rest of the Mediterranean space, both in the north and in the south. And to spep about all these topics, we will be two people moderating the debate. I have with me Dr. Viola Raheb. Viola, she is Palestinian, she lives in Wien, and she is professor and researcher in religious studies, and she's also one of the people training our activists that have gathered here in Valencia during these days. Now I'm going to present our speakers, and I'm going to begin with those coming from far away. Ibrahim Al-Fawal. He is Syrian. He is an activist working on historic memory, and in particular in a country like Syria that has been fragmented and destroyed for many years of repression after the revolution of 2011. Ibrahim comes from Al-Huta, is one of the quarters that had rebelled against the Damascus regime. We also have with us Nuran El Arabi. She is researcher from Libya, from Benghazi. Welcome. She is an activist working on freedom of speech and expression, and she is also a trainer of civil society organizations. We have also Igor Blažević. He is the founder of the most important film festivals on human rights in Europe and also in the world. It's called One World Festival. It takes place in Prague, and it takes place all around the world in many countries. Igor, he is Bosnian and now lives in the Czech Republic. We also have Aroa Mira. She is member, deputy of the Corts Valencianes of the Parliament of Spain, the regional government of Valencia, and she is delegate of the Socialist Party, also responsible of youth affairs, cooperation, and human rights. And we also have Manuel Mata Gomez, Manolo, And those living here in Valencia, you know him very well. He's also a member of the Cortes Valencianas, the regional government. He's a lawyer with a long experience in social commitment and also politics commitment. He's also a member and co-founder of the Asamblea de Ciudadanos del Mediterráneo, the Mediterranean Citizens Assembly, and they have invited us to have our workshops here in Valencia. They're the responsible of these workshops. The debate will be divided in two. We will have a first part where our speakers, our guests, will elaborate some ideas led by Viola, and in the second part they will speak about some other more open topics. It will be more like a round table between the guests and also the public. The public will have the opportunity of asking some questions in two occasions, at the end of the first part and also at the end of the second part.
Gianluca, and welcome to our guests and hosts at the same time. We're in Valencia, so I would like to start with Mr. Manuel Mata Gomez. We know that you have here the Valencia Coalition for Progress, and we'd like to ask you to share with us how it was established and the role of the social movement and civil society in its establishment. Welcome.
The university began with what was called the Valencian Spring. This was a gap that was opened within the system, and it swept away the political parties, and there were some events that happened here that were terrible. There was a major accident in one of the lines of the regional government where 43 people died, and the regional government tried to hide that, tried to manipulate the information in the media and in the public television, and there began to be protests, movements within universities, schools, and they began identifying topics that turned the left in the reference of the politics in the Valencian society. It was a very uneven fight because the Popular Party controlled all the institutions, all the economical power, and most of the media power. And from then on, in 2015, there was formed a new government from three political powers: the Socialists, Compromís, this nationalist party, and Podemos, the left-wing party. And now the moderator is telling me I only have 1 minute left, but I want to say or show you that this was very fresh air in the institutions and in the parliament. Podemos was born as a movement linked to rebellion, to 15 AM, to the squares, to the new social movements that wanted to change politics within the system. My perception, my view is that politics does not consist on choosing between good and evil, but choosing between what can be improved and what is undesirable. We can end up saying that they are also politics, and that's good. We think that in the end, politics is something very valuable, very important, and if the citizens believe that the politicians do not represent them, what we are putting in risk is democracy, and we need to change politicians. So thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank Valencia for this great welcome. I also want to thank all the people here, all the participants, because we have heard many interesting data. We have learned many things. I want to speak about Libya today. The first question goes around myself. What made me enter the activism field within the civil society framework? I come from a country that for 40 years has suffered dictatorship where there was only one opinion, one voice, an autocratic political system, a system where, for example, we didn't have any education that respected differences, an educational system where we only hear one single voice. We didn't hear any different voice, nothing different. The revolution in Libya was a magnificent occasion to realize the importance of civil society. When I realized the importance of civil society, at the moment where I realized that we can have a voice and we can have a representation, at that very moment I began working in the field of civil society, supporting the Libyan revolution, conveying the same message of the Libyan revolution in all our generations, to try to change the educational system so that the kids are able to express their difference, their diversity, their impressions. That was what made me enter the civil society framework. It was by coincidence that I found one day a journalist, and I asked her, "What are you doing?" And she told me, "Well, you know, I need to know what's happening. I would like to express something different, a new interest from the social point of view." So how do I value the civil society? Well, I would like to say that I believe that Libyan society is an exceptional society, because the situation it is experiencing is not like it's unlike other countries. Before the revolution, we had certain civil institutions, and they did not exist. We were isolated somehow. There was some aid for poor people with clothes or food, but we could not create new civil society institutions because we were afraid of repression. After 2011, something curious happened. At the same time, there was a new society growing at local but also at international level. The Libyan citizen realized that this was something strange. He joined both things. We have the internal activists speaking in the name of the people, but also on behalf of the people, but also countries intervening in our country. And we realized that civil society, besides all difficulties suffered, it is a society that tries to leverage the ideas from foreign countries, even though that the intervention of foreign countries is not very well seen within the country, within our country. But we need to take into account that this activity in Libya, well, Libya did not trust the political system. That was terrible, because in Libya, the citizen also does not trust civil society. That means politician does not represent society, does not represent the people, and also not the civil society. Institutions have not been able to represent the Libyan people. That means to join the different elements of the Libyan society. The idea of having new institutions in the civil society, and that was born in 2011, that has some positive aspect. It is like a new kid that has the capability of drawing a new history, of building a new civil society in a good way, of teaching people from scratch, because we are beginning right now to teach what's the civil society, what's its role. So the real role is to articulate the voice of the people. Its role is to offer an alternative to education. That means to follow the different events, to make people be aware and awake, so that their voice reaches the institutions, and also to build new, real institutions, and also able to be long-lasting and to represent the people. That's what we are working right now. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. It's really kind of nice to be first time in my life, let's say, in your place, and it's a really pleasure to have opportunity to share and to discuss with you. Look, I'll try to be kind of quick. Let's say the civil society in Central Europe is basically doing well, I would say. We are middle-class society, educated middle-class society, enough to be able to generate the strong civil society which is doing its usual civil society work. I would say more civic activism than professionalized civil society NGO sector. Civil society NGO sector is very often locked into the log frames, donors' agenda, and so on, and it's not effective. But since we are kind of the civil active middle class, relatively well off, let's say, we are able to generate enough active citizenship, which is doing all the corrections which are necessary. Then when it's a question, what sort of the corrections are necessary in our part of the world, that means Central Europe, and I think you're looking also East Europe. Basically, there are a couple of levels. Let's say one level is you have accountable, transparent, responsible government, good democracy. Then you can have something what probably, let's say, you face here, that sometimes political class is becoming corrupt and becoming disconnected from the society, is not serving society, is serving private interests of them as a political class and whoever are the clients. This is one level of the problem. But then we in East Europe are facing another type of the problem. We are facing problem of the oligarchic threat, that our economic and political systems can be captured by the hugely concentrated financial resources, which are usually stolen in a privatization sector. And this is such a disadvantage in a society of amount of the economic power which they have, and then they use this economic power to basically capture the media power, to capture the beauty and football power, because they invest in a beauty shows and in a football, and then in one moment they capture political parties, and then they capture the state. And then your democracy basically becomes the competition between the different oligarchic groups. That's a completely different beast than the corruption which you have, because you are facing something which is much more powerful than the normal corruption. The fourth level, what we have, is when you have basically a situation that you have in Russia and in other places where you basically have the kleptocratic mafia which emerged from the security apparatus. So you basically have the merged mafia ready to kill you, security apparatus, secret police, and the kind of the political class which are controlling huge natural resources and have that kind of the power which is ready to use the brutal violence against the civil society. So this is completely another beast. So we are on the level of the between corrupt and oligarchic. And our civil society is doing a pretty good work in defending that. But at the same time, we have an interesting, important phenomenon in our countries, which we entered into the European Union. We have this kind of dream going to Europe, becoming democratic and so on. And for 20 years, we are basically consolidating good democracy. Now, 10 years, we are regressing. The big question is why we are regressing. And I would kind of describe it on one sociological research which has recently been done in the Czech Republic. I found it really telling for us, but also for many others. Basically, this sociological research identified what are the current key social economic groups in the Czech Republic, and they divided it in the following way. One group is a well-off class. That means people, let's say, who are educated, successful, and they have accumulated wealth. They are not extraordinarily rich, but they are well off. The second group is what they call cosmopolitan class. These are kind of you guys, me. And educated, doesn't have a lot of financial assets. You still haven't turned your good education into the money and into the wealth, but you will come there. You are networked and you are part of the globalized work. You are part of the internet world. But in addition to that, in our Czech society, we have a kind of a few other classes. One is they call it class of the local ties. People in the small cities also having their small businesses. They are having their small networks, but they are local. Their ties are local. They don't want to be they don't want to be globalized. They want much more protection than the current world is giving them. Their values are different. Then the next class is working class, and a big segment of that is basically working poor, struggling class. You live from month to the month. You work very hard, and you live in a profound insecurity. And the last kind of the class is what they call destituted class. There's about 1 million people in my country who are in a destituted class. That's usually people who are under the execution. They borrow the money, they can't. We have a predatory kind of the financial system. They cannot give back the loans, and the loans are just coming bigger and bigger. And then this division basically has shown that only first two classes, well-off class and cosmopolitan class, lives like a fish in a pond in a globalized world. All other classes basically kind of want a different political system, different economic system. They basically vote for another values. And our populists have realized that very well and has played that card very well. Problem of the civil society that we are cosmopolitan class. We are also profoundly disconnected from this rest of the society. So we are playing our game, us as a cosmopolitan class against well-off class, if the well-off class is a kind of the source of the corrupt political choice. But in a certain way, we are part of these globalized elites. And we are, in a certain, and then when you go more in the East, you are basically more and more disconnected from something what I called abandoned society. So civil society is not just the politicians, they are not anymore society, but civil society stopped to be society. And that's where I see the key problem in our case, but in many, many other places as well.
Thank you, Igor.
It's been 11 years since the beginning of the Syrian rebellions that were supposed to be pacific. But I would like to listen, to hear around these Syrian revolts, rebellions, who are the main stakeholders in this profound pain of the Syrian society. First question, I would like to offer my personal context, what I've experienced in the place I was born. I was born in Douma, it's next to Damascus. I was born in a place called the Kingdom of Fear, or the Black Box, such as my colleague Nurana said about Libya. We have got used of a single-party system to the extent that Syrians know very well this popular saying that says everything will be darker and darker. So we have got used to the secret police that are always investigating and researching everyone. I would like to remind you the principles of the Arab Spring when we began to see in the television the news about Tunisia, Libya, and movements in the different Arab countries, and we were speaking and asking ourselves what will happen in Syria, what will be our future when one after another the regimes of Egypt, Tunisia fell down. That was good news for us. We felt that Syria would be the next one. I was 22 at that time, and I didn't know the meaning of freedom at that time. But with the events of March 2011, I had the feeling that I could be free, that I would be able to express my inner ideas, that I could be a fighter, that I could enter the field of politics, enter the zone of politics. That was a historical moment. That was great. But as any autocratic regime, they they shot the protests, the people protests that began being pacific, peaceful. So they began a campaign of tortures, of imprisonment, all that. I was considering at that time that this was a new birth, that this was something completely new. My relation with the city before the revolution was bad, but it changed radically after the revolution. I realized that I belonged to this city, to these people that were trying to change the situation and looking for a better place to live. About the question on the transition towards a new place, well, we are here in Valencia. We are in a place where there were victims of the civil war, and as we have seen in one of the field visits that we did, my position in this sense is I saw 6-7 people dying in Syria. I saw the Syrian regime using weapons directly against these people. I was And all this changed my opinion. Things changed completely. The revolution turned into something obscure. At that moment, I felt the wounds, and that the most important thing would be to convey a message that we have a responsibility. I'm the only people of that group of 6, 7 people that has been able to come here, and therefore my responsibility is to convey the message, to send you a message that can reach anywhere, any state, in any state where there is a right state. And we dream with a democracy. We dream of reaching democracy, of getting rid of dictatorship. We come from a place that was very different before. It's difficult to express your opinion in a place like that, where there is so much oppression. And that's the main reason why we have desired to change history, to convey the voice of the Syrian people, that at personal level. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. After hearing the people before me, it's true that speaking about human rights is speaking about something grand, something big. We are aware that in many countries, and not so far away from Spain, the human rights are being violated, and in the parliament, in the courts Valencianes, what we do is to give voice to all those injustices that happen for many countries. For us to be able to focus on what's happening and also the terrible consequences of the violation of human rights. For many countries it's very important because it's a way for them to have a support from our side. And it's true that it's not so long that I am deputy in the courts and the regional government, and I've realized that this is a commission working hard, and sometimes social services, human rights, all these topics are a bit, so if you allow me the expression, is the poor sister, so to say, of all politics or policies. And we see here in this context that we are now in this debate, that people are working on human rights, that there is a resolution of the NATO, United Nations, that recognizes the violation of human rights, and sometimes over human rights the economy prevails, and it's true that we are privileged in Spain. We have had to fight hard to be where we are now. You've seen in Paterna the reason, you've seen firsthand the history of repression that we had here for more than 40 years. But it's true that we have looked forward, that we have broken many schemes or changed many schemes to be able to be where we are right now, to have our position nowadays. And Spain is a country that I think everything is subject of improvement, but I think Spain is a referent, and I think we have the obligation of contributing to denounce the violation of human rights in many countries and to try to change the situation step by step. It's difficult. We are aware of that, of the complexity. In the regional government, the Cortes Valencianes, we make cross-sectional groups. We work, for example, in the topic of Sahara, of Palestine, of Colombia, and it's also a way of knowing firsthand what's happening. And for them, it's also important to have us supporting them. It's hard work, but I believe it's important. And the fact that you are here today and that you are able to see other ways of looking at reality, at democracy, at human rights, it's important. I think you take home great lessons, great experiences, and as Manolo has said, you are already the present, but you're also the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
My question is for Manuel. Thank you. So you have said, Mr. Manuel, you have expressed very well the state of the matter, the Valencian Spring. You have spoken also about the movement of students in universities, and that it has been contested with violence, but it has reached a political channel within the parliament in Valencia. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I am a young Syrian, and I have a question about the student movement, about this revolution in Valencia in 2011 until 2013. There was also a movement in Damascus, a student movement that was based precisely in the demonstrations in common spaces in universities. Vindications were very clear. They were the declarations of the revolution. And in my opinion, this didn't last more than 6 months. It's sad because after this 6 months, this student revolution ended. I participated in these demonstrations, in the protests, but it was destroyed. This student demonstration was destroyed. That movement in the university, when I went to university, was destroyed. There was no student able to express their own opinion. There was no possibility of debate anymore. That happened after that all these student movements in Syria were destroyed. My question about Valencia is that I would like to know a bit more about that student spring in Valencia, which was the destiny, the trajectory, the destiny of those protests. How can we compare what happened in Syria, this absolute destruction, absolute violence of the regime, of the government, all the institutions, what prevented the government here in Valencia to use violence against the students? What made the students continue their own path? So thank you. You have the microphone. So I also wanted to make a question that doesn't have to do directly with politics or the role of politicians. You've said that we need to change politics from the people, so beginning with the people, but the most important thing is how can we claim for this change? Who are going to be in charge of this process so that the extremist policies change, or those this competence of political parties? How can we influence in the field of political parties?
Bonsoir, ma question je vais la poser en français. Abdel Rizé d'Algérie. Et pourquoi j'ai précisé que je suis algérien, c'est parce qu'il y avait il y a 2 ans, en 2019, un mouvement qui a été très très pacifique en Algérie.
There was in 2019 a very peaceful movement in Algeria, and so this led to a change in the Algerian government. The president was president for 20 years, is not a president anymore, and we had lots of corrupted ministers, and so the system was changed. But actually, all the goals of the Algerian people haven't been met because we have different goals done by the people or by public administration. So why did I mention a peaceful movement? I think this is what allowed Algeria to avoid a Syrian conflict or a Libyan situation, or what happened as well in Tunisia a few years back, which didn't doesn't lead to such unforeseen violence, but some violence. I mean, do you think that this could be a model to follow up, or do you think that if in any change you need some distraction?
شكرا جزيلا في بعد سنين بس بالجولة الجاي حتى مايل. So would you like to
Thank you very much. I hope that you do not forget the questions. Well, if you pay attention, all governments, all dictatorships want to destroy the student movement, the education, universities, because the seed of every change, every great change, begins in the educational system. From May 68 in France, or take a look at what happened in Chile some months ago with the student revolts, and now Boric is the president. But how can we, you have asked that, how we make civil society to change politics? Well, I believe that only politics changes things. Civil society is the conscience of society, is the driver of movements, but only democracy and parties can change things. And we need to understand that, because we cannot be hyperactivists limited in a certain field. We cannot compare countries. There are countries where they do not have any freedom of expression. They destroy the whole movement of the right to information. Some other countries that cut any informational ways, the internet, for example, or educational ways, and also the power of secret police, intelligentsia, all forces mobilized against democracy. But it's important that you advocate within politics. There has been a seed of the far right wing in the whole of Europe. They want to annihilate democracy, to kill democracy. Democracy is not perfect. It's true. There are corrupt politicians. There are political parties that are not useful to society, but only politics can change things. Tony Benn, he was a deputy that had been 50 years in Parliament. When he left the Parliament, he said, I'm going to leave the Parliament to devote my life to politics, because politics means living. A political party is the most powerful NGO, because they can make laws, they can change the life of people. It is terrible that the youth are disconnected from politics. The Valencian Spring is not comparable to any of your springs in your countries, because even though the police here it's true that the police here in Valencia are subject to the law, but in some countries protests end up with tortures, killings, imprisonments. So what I'm telling you is that these statistics that you have seen are a drama for politics. We need to find the ways to participate in politics, the patience to participate in politics. We should not identify politics as something negative and perverse that represses societies. Politics can be something that makes us free. But we need to have optimism and hope. And it is also the obligation of politicians. Take a look at Chile. Salvador Allende said that the reasons why it's worth dying are those without which one could not live. And we cannot live without freedom, without democracy, without solidarity, without social justice, and without equality. And this all summarizes in a fight for equality between human beings, between rich and poor, and the hope is in politics. That's my message, my main message.
Okay, then I would like, I saw you I would like to beg your pardon. We'll take you in the second round due to one thing. We have the translator for a very short time. So I would like to invite Gianluca to move forward with the second, and then you will be the first one to ask.
Thank you. Thank you, Viola. Thank you for all the participants. After having heard all this context, we are here in Valencia, but we have different European contexts in the southern bank of the Mediterranean. But I would like to reflect a bit on the future that we can build to see how to overcome this distancing. So politics is the key to change realities, it's true, but I would like to have an open debate and also to reflect on this topic, how to reduce this distance between political parties and the youth, and also between the society and the institutions, the ways to find a way so that politics is again a space where everyone participates, even the youth. Who wants to contribute?
أوكي. في رأيي مجددا بما أني دائما أتحدث عن أهمية المجتمع المدني.
Well, my point of view, I think it's important to speak about civil society. And what I want to say is that politics is very important, but sometimes we speak about states where politics and politicians are willing to hear, but in other countries, politicians are very far away from the needs of the population. And that's why we have that desire of politics representing the people, and to have an involvement of the youth and a true work to reinforce the civil society. Because if civil society pressures politicians, it will establish a link between the politics, the youth, the society, a link for their requirements, their desires. So the capacity of reinforcing and having a strong civil society, that could be a card, a joker to pressure politicians to be able to reduce this distance between politicians and youth and in the society. To speak about civil society and politics can be a very important experience for me, but I try to focus on the rights of the other people and the ethical part, the ethical work. I think it's sometimes more important than the work of the civil society. In these times, there are interests from the politicians. They also get pressures, lobbying from other forces. And from my point of view, the youth do not trust politicians because they do not feel secure. They do not feel any security. And the distance between the youth and the politicians needs to be reduced. The Syrian thinker Hanik Sabeh says that there is a superficial policy and also an underground policy. The superficial or surface policy obliges you by assignments. They do not choose people by their skills, but only because of links and connections. All the rich people are in the political class. They are the ones deciding over the laws and the society. And before making a policy, well, we need to reduce this distance to summarize.
هنكون سريعة ولكن أعتقد أنا شخصيا من تجربة في ليبيا
I will be quick. From my experience in Libya, I believe that if the other countries, when they work with an Arab country, well, the real demand, the real requirement is that we need to respect the particularities of each country. I've participated in different debates and I've seen attempts of making us feel that the problems are equal, are the same in all countries. It's not true. Libya, they have their own problems, their own particularities. I've been working in this for many years, and I realized that many practices that politicians follow are attempts that carry, so to say, a suitcase from one country to the other. And the case studies do not take into account these differences. They come from other countries and they do not take into account the different particularities, the different challenges that Libya faces, the difficulties that it has suffered in terms of policies and politics. What I ask the international society is a real study, a real commitment with the difference, with what the diversity. So if we want to improve the education in Libya, we need to take into account that, yes, it's true to have international support, but we need to see what things Libya needs really, because generally we find cooperation with local stakeholders. That's important, to cooperate with local stakeholders, to be in contact with people that are there on the field, on the ground. They can connect with the European donors. It's important to go beyond and not to have preconceived ideas. We need to change, not to impose one model of a country in another country. We need to see the particularities of the different countries. We need to see the different political systems and coordinate and fit aid to each country.
Yo creo que esa es una de las claves. El problema es que
I think that's one of the keys. You see the difference of Europe, the Eastern Europe, and with all that process of privatization that has created great structures, these cosmopolitan levels that have nothing to do with France and Spain. But in other countries, it's radically different. The colleague from Algeria has spoken about it. I was there in 1991 after the local elections, and the government didn't like the results of that election and put the army into the streets. And as you know, you well know what happened. And from our point of view, from the Western world, from the European world, from the Southern European world, we allow ourselves to give lessons to Syria, Libya, or other countries that not even within themselves have the same political, economical conditions. That's one of the main challenges that we face, to be over the national structures. Europe was more Europe thanks to the Erasmus program. 40 years ago, someone came up with the idea that it would be good that a girl from Northern Europe could come 4 months to Valencia to study, someone from Lithuania could study in Italy. And organizations like ACM and other movements, they want us to hear each other, and that's crucial. It's very important that young people have the most wide look as possible, that they are able to value what's happening and to convey their experiences, the experiences they have outside in foreign countries, and take them to their own country. There are no model models to follow. Each country is their own model. And Europe and the Western world have destroyed the other bank, the other coast of the Mediterranean for economical, political reasons, geostrategic reasons. And that has also contaminated the political systems of other countries, the use of other countries. In this game scenario, we have created dictators in some countries, some armies prevailing over other armies. There's always been European countries behind these strategic movements. The challenge is to match civil society with politics in each of the countries. That's the main reality. The awareness for environment has been conveyed by this Fridays movement. It was a civil society. There were expectations in the north of Africa, and the answer from the governments after all these springs was terrible. Women also play a crucial role in the new fight, and I insist, politics is the true element of transformation. Each country should have their own, but you know within your own country who you have to be with and who you have to be against.
Maybe we'll have the chance. I think it's if it's okay for, I'll take it. So we had Amal as first one.
Merci beaucoup. Désolé Abdel Fattah, ma question commence par
Thank you very much. I have another perspective. I do respect yours. My question is for Madame Aroa. We are talking about the professionalization of the fight, but we should also talk about the politicization of the fight. And I have a question on your experience. The social movement that led almost to a revolution, we have seen a full rejection of the human rights and even social movement. Workers' unions, for example, the trade unions that are born during the Arab Spring, we see that the women movement that has been heavily criticized. So when the Chirac was creating a new movement, well, we've seen that all the council have been rejected. So please try to be brief. So our council has been rejected, and because they were scared of the lack of religion, others because they were afraid of the women's rights, wealthy people were afraid to lose their privileges. So I think that this is something that has disappeared from the legislation of 1967. When fighting against the violence against women, we have the Spanish example, followed by the 288 different devices. So I would like to know what is the role of the politicians in the history of the women's movement in Algeria. We see that this movement is still heavily politicized, and it's still a movement from the left parties, and they refuse to work with the parliament. Our project is the framework law that we find in Spain, so I would like to know more about that law.
Thank you. I'll take another two. Can you please keep it? Is it okay? Thank you. لا بعد انت حكيتي مرة حتى نعطي.
اوكي يعطيكم العافيه شكرا. السؤال لكم الاثنين.
La question est pour nos deux invités. Donc je viens de la Palestine.
My question is for both of you. I come from Palestine, and the situation in Palestine, as you know, is very difficult because it's not only our government doing things quite weirdly because there's much corruption, but we also have the Israeli occupation. So what's the role of the people? What are we seeing nowadays in the Palestinian people? And the question is, how can the Palestinian people have a future? What do we need to do facing the future? The second question is that international organizations of human rights in Europe are always against oppression, against discrimination, against violence, against deportations, against torture. They always defend freedom of speech, but what we are seeing is that in Palestine, many innocent people have been deprived of the rights, both by the Palestinian government, and the Israeli occupation government. Well, I truly believe that the people there is lost. We have reached a situation that is very weird, very strange. We do not know what will happen tomorrow. We do not know what our future is. Maybe you can shed a light on this question, maybe.
We'll take the last one and then a short comment on.
راح أحكي بالعربي. اللي هو احنا قاعدين نحكي انتوا حكيتوا عن كيف ان الشعب لازم يكون متامل بالسياسات.
Well, I think it's clear that the people need to participate in the politics, but we come from countries where politics has always been oppressive. We do not see any real representation of our demands, not in any of the governments existing in our countries. We do not see that our demands are met. All the political corruption is not stopped by anyone. We do not see any institution representing the people. And before this situation, how can the people trust? They cannot trust a bit politicians and institutions. I believe in the change. I believe that the people needs to build, to demand politicians to represent the people. We need a revolution. But just think about that we peoples do not have any hope because the situation is that way. What the institutions do, they just repress the people. People feels repressed, does not feel any support. We have many dictators that are just conveying their politics of repression and injustice. They are creating a terrible context. I would just say one last thing. I believe that there are many congresses where European people come participate with us and they benefit, they learn from our experiences. But I believe that they do not take a clear position against the Syrian government, for example. I think we need clarity in, so to say, in a posture against the Syrian regime. Well, I come from the Ministry of Education, and I believe that we have hope. I believe that human rights are something that we miss because we lack of that power for change to make people be involved in the change. I would like to hear your opinion on precisely these political questions. I mean, politics linked to institutions? Why politics fail in that context? Why politics is not able to represent the people, to be the link with the people? We have representatives here. I would like to know your opinion on that.
Go back to you, Samar.
Don't remember anymore.
So that not only Palestinians are talking.
I want to come back to the civil society and specifically about the European Citizen Initiative, because I want to share that in 2021, when there was the ethnic cleansing of Sheikh Jarrah by the Israeli occupation forces, there was a citizen European initiative that collected more than 1 million signatures, and they submitted an immediate request from the European Commission to boycott the trade with the settler colonialism of the Israeli occupation in the occupied territories of Palestine. And this citizens' European initiative passed from the European Court, but the European Commissioner refused it with an excuse that this will disturb the economic relation with a partner country or a friend country, which brings us to what you say, that unfortunately still economy and profit comes over human rights. So this is also up for politicians to take part in.
Thank you, Samar. So,
well, there have been many different questions. You have spoken about equality, you have spoken about Palestine, about many things. It's true that each country has its own reality. That's clear, and I wish that I had the solution for all these needs of all those countries. It's true that in the field we work at, what we can do, as I said before, is to be the speaker, so the loudspeaker of this violation of human rights in all your countries, in each of the countries. The colleague was speaking about the role of women in Algeria. Here in Spain, we have fought very much until we women have the power we have nowadays. And it's not easy because still there are inequalities in our society. And it's also true that it is a crucial role, and it's important that women take a step forward to reach that equality. I may be politically incorrect, so to say, but we are in a forum where this should be said, and I'm going to say what I think. In the Palestine conflict topic, it's true that many times Europe has been asked to do something, and it's true that Europe could have done much more. That is true. And it's true also that sometimes the other things prevail over the role of human rights, and that's a reality. And we need to be aware of that. It's difficult. These conflicts last for many years, and we see some interests in them, and we as politicians, it's true that the only thing that we can do from here is to try not to be next to those entities that come to us asking for support. And our role right now, this is the only thing that we can do. I do not have the power. I wish I had the power to end with a conflict such as the Palestinian one. I wish I could end the conflict of the Sahara. I could go to Libya, to Syria, but it's true that it's not in our hands. But what we can do is to be the loudspeaker of everything that is happening, the violation, systemic violation of human rights. And we have said it before, each country has its own peculiarities, its own features, and sometimes we think that what we do in one country is good for every country. It's not true. Libya has a different reality from Syria, and each country is different. In Spain, we live a very different reality, and probably it's not the best. But it's true that we can contribute, we can help, we can back those minorities that are asking us for help, but we do not have the power to change that situation. And I'm sorry to say it, but I cannot lie. I need to be honest and realistic and to say things as they are. And if you allow me just one little thing, when we were speaking about civil society and politics here in Spain, there is a very great distance and a very great disaffection with politics. And it's a reality. The young people here in Spain do not want to hear anything about politics. And sometimes I wonder, what have we done from the sphere of politicians? What have we done to create the situation? Because politics should serve the society. I entered the politics because for me politics is a tool to change the life of people. So something has broken between the society and the politicians, and we need to recover, to regain that link, because in the end we need to be together. I need to know what the people in the streets think, to transform into policies what people think. It's important for me, and we politicians should be more in the streets. We need to hear more. We need to gather all these demands that people have. And this is a joint work. And I'm not going to say anything else, but I just wanted to say that I wish I had this magic wand of power to end with every conflict and all injustices that we see in the world. But we are there. We work for that. Thank you.
Where is the micro?
No need.
5 minutes.
A los intérpretes se nos dan 2 minutos más.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I would like to ask also if it's possible at the end, then if Igor can just give in 1 minute some key words on, because he has been working a lot on the civil society activists engaging in changing realities, political and power realities.
Can give a few minutes. Can
Okay.
hear you because you don't have micro.
Yeah. Okay, so إبراهيم بلش
Yes,
it's okay. إبراهيم بلش.
سامعين صوتي؟
يا سامعين هم.
إجابة على سؤالك جلوكا ماذا أتوقع من الأوروبيين؟
Can you hear me? So answering the question what we expect from Europeans, I'm grateful for these words. I expect not to normalize relations with dictatorships, because I believe what we should do is to break the relationships with regimes such as Assad or Sisi in Egypt. Any non-democratic government, Europe should show that it doesn't agree with those non-democratic regimes, and Europe should break with these relations and also support civil societies. So what we want is development. We do not want to fight against Daesh so much, but to have tools to improve education on the ground. That's what we expect from European countries.
And I've tried to be, all of you open so many questions that we can now continue next 3 years. But I'll try to be quick. Let's say, respond on you. Don't expect anything from the West and from the democracies now. That's the best thing what you can do. Let's say, basically, base your struggle on your own power, which you can mobilize. We are living in a completely dysfunctional world in which we have again a big competition between the very assertive dictatorships in Russia and more ambitious China, And basically we have a West which has gone through the big disappointment of being engaged in a democracy promotion in the world. So West is moving and doesn't have a confidence anymore that we know how to do it. Others know how to help dictators. So for time being, you will be much stronger if you don't expect too much, build your own power, and then help will come when you have your own power. So this is one thing. The second thing, for all of you who have gone through this kind of the big hopeful uprising, and then you have been crushed, you are not the first one. Let's say fighting for the freedom is always heavy costs, and you basically gain the freedom through going through the couple of traumatic defeats, and it's a huge responsibility of you to turn your defeat into lessons, in a memory, and then use that lesson and a memory when you come next time. Let's say that basically you have this experience, power, network, and so on, that next time you fight from the stronger position. But important message, if you are coming from the diverse, deeply divided society, then fighting the regime is not enough. Because if you topple down regime, if you are divided, deeply societies, then that will fire back. So use that time also, if you are in a deeply divided society, to create the alliances and understanding before you go into the final fight against the regime. If you don't create this deeper consensus, how the future society and future state will look like, then when you take down the dictatorship, you will start to fight each other. And learn that lesson. And it's not easy to find a compromise. But if you make the compromise before and forge the alliance then in an important struggle, then you have a better future for your country. The last thing, if I just can, let's say, when you ask what the European can do, one thing I warn you, don't fall in a trap. I will take example from the Bosnia. We have, during the war, created the most strong cultural, civil society, spiritual resistance against the terrible war with our own forces. The war ended, the donors came, the European Union came with the money, with the projects, with the log frames, and we basically finished sitting and not doing anything unless somebody give us $100 in that moment. So civil society activism became how much I get. And we basically through that created the desert in a genuine activism in our country. When that was happening, we had a lot of forums, a lot of everything was happening in hotels, in hipsterish places. At the same time, two guys, I call it my Wahhabists, came to my neighborhood and opened a mobile shop down there, and they have spent 5 years. We are spending 5 years doing democracy and engagement. They have been in our community, and every morning when my mother go out, they say, "Good morning, old lady." They talk with her, small talk, they leave it there. 5 years later, these two Wahhabists have telling people how to vote, and people in my neighborhood are voting in a way how they set up. All of us sitting in hipsterish places doing civil society had zero impact. So be careful, don't disconnect yourself from your own society. Let's say, if you do that, I think you have a chance, because freedom is so inspiring. You said, let's say, I have felt it. You will never forget it. You will come back, and many others will come back. But be careful of these kind of the traps which are very, very open come.
Thank you, Igor. Going on transformation is not a 100-meter run. No, it's a long marathon, and we will fall. We will lose our power. It's not sure we will arrive, but if we are not moving now, the generation behind us will not be able to continue. So thank you for reminding us. You've inspired us.